Last week you were sitting in your garden in shirt sleeves. Tonight you may be scraping ice off your car. That is not a dramatic headline, that is the actual forecast. And the science behind this sudden reversal is far more serious than most people realize. What is heading for the United Kingdom right now is not a typical April cold snap. It is an Arctic maritime air mass, a body of air that is tracked directly from the North Pole, dragging temperatures down with a speed and severity that is rare for this time of year. And the story of how it got here tells you something important about the state of Britain's atmosphere in spring 2026. To understand what is happening tonight, you have to go back several months. In February and March 2026, the stratosphere above the Arctic experienced a sudden and dramatic warming event. The temperature in the stratosphere over the North Pole spiked by between 30 and 40 degrees Celsius in just a matter of days. That event, which scientists call a sudden stratospheric warming, sent shockwaves through the entire atmospheric system above the northern hemisphere. The polar vortex, the enormous column of rotating cold air that normally sits locked above the Arctic and keeps polar air contained, did not just weaken. It split into two separate fragments. That is the most destructive form of polar vortex collapse that meteorologists recognize, and its consequences take 3 to 5 weeks to filter down from the stratosphere into the weather that people on the ground actually experience. That lag is exactly what the UK is feeling right now. The stratospheric event happened weeks ago. The disruption it caused to the polar jet stream has been building quietly ever since, and tonight, that disruption is arriving on British doorsteps in the form of a northerly wind that is dragging some of the coldest air the country has seen since midwinter. The mechanics of this are straightforward once you understand the pattern. When the polar vortex splits, the jet stream loses its tight westerly structure. Instead of flowing cleanly from west to east across the North Atlantic and keeping mild air pushed toward Britain, it buckles and bends into a wavy, disorganized pattern. That wavy pattern opens the door for Arctic air to slide southward along the back of a high-pressure block. In this case, the block that has established itself is a ridge of high pressure anchored over Greenland and the far North Atlantic. That Greenland block has effectively slammed the door on the mild westerly flow that usually buffers the UK from the worst of what sits above the Arctic Circle. With that door closed, the atmosphere found an alternative route, and that route leads directly from the North Pole to the British Isles. The wind direction tonight and into tomorrow is the single most important factor in understanding just how cold this will feel. Temperatures on the thermometer may not look dramatically low on paper. Widely, daytime values will sit around 6 to 9 degrees Celsius across much of England and Wales, but the direction of this wind is a northerly, arriving from the Arctic maritime source region, and it carries a wind chill that strips 10 degrees or more off the felt temperature. In exposed locations, particularly along the east coast and across elevated ground in the north and Midlands, the real field temperature will drop to near zero or below during daylight hours. By tonight, with skies clearing and winds easing overnight, actual air temperatures in rural Scotland are expected to fall to around -5 degrees Celsius. Parts of Wales and northern England could see -2. Frost will form widely, roads will ice over on untreated surfaces, and anyone who stepped outside this morning expecting mild April air is going to have a sharp and unpleasant surprise before they reach the end of their street. Scotland is bearing the full force of this event earliest and hardest. The Northern Isles are taking the brunt of the wind, with gusts funneling across exposed coastlines and open ground. Snow has already been falling on high ground across the Highlands, and showers of hail and sleet are accompanying the heavier squalls moving southward. The Cairngorms and other elevated terrain already hold significant snow at altitude. In Aberdeenshire and Moray, communities that have seen some of the heaviest snowfall in living memory this winter are once again dealing with wintry conditions in a month that should, by every historical measure, be feeling like spring. The cold front pushing south through England and Wales today is carrying heavy showers in its wake. These showers are falling as rain at low levels across most of England, but with sleet possible on higher ground in the Peak District, the Pennines, and areas of North Wales. Meteorologists are watching the southern progression of the cold air carefully. The Met Office has confirmed that as higher pressure builds through this week, winds will gradually back from the bitter northwesterly to a slightly less punishing westerly. But the nights through at least the next 48 hours will remain sharply cold. Anyone with young plants, late-season growth, or outdoor seedlings needs to act tonight. There is a wider context to this event that deserves attention. The April cold snap arriving tonight is happening against the backdrop of the most meteorologically extreme 12 months Britain has recorded in modern times. The winter of 2025 into 2026 delivered 55 consecutive wet days in Cornwall. Record rainfall soaked Dorset, South Wales, and the southwest. January brought the kind of cold snap that produced -12.5 degrees Celsius at Marham in Norfolk, the coldest reading at that station in years. Half a meter of snow fell across parts of Aberdeenshire during the deepest winter cold. And then spring arrived with a violent lurch in the opposite direction, sending temperatures briefly toward the mid-20s in southeast England in early April, nearly 10 degrees above the seasonal average. Scientists have a name for this kind of pattern. They call it climate whiplash. The rapid swinging between warm extremes and cold extremes, driven by a jet stream that has become increasingly erratic and unstable, is becoming one of the defining features of the British climate in the 2020s. Research published in 2026 confirmed that short-term weather whiplashes of this type have become between a third and two-thirds more frequent globally over recent decades. The UK sits at a particularly vulnerable junction in the North Atlantic atmospheric system, where small changes in jet stream positioning translate quickly into large swings in conditions at the surface. The La Niña event that sat in the background of the entire 2025 into 2026 winter season is now weakening. La Niña conditions tend to reduce the strength of the Azores High, the pressure system that usually helps push mild Atlantic air toward Europe. Without a strong Azores High to reinforce the westerly flow, the atmosphere is more susceptible to blocking patterns like the Greenland block that is currently driving cold air into Britain. The weakening of La Niña does not mean conditions will immediately improve. Transitions between ENSO states often produce the most unpredictable and volatile weather windows of all, as competing atmospheric signals pull the circulation in different directions. Long-range seasonal models from NetWeather and ECMWF are both indicating that April 2026 will likely continue to be characterized by a flow often arriving from the north or northwest, bringing further showery and cool periods with the risk of overnight frosts persisting. The signal for more settled patterns strengthens as May approaches, but the immediate weeks ahead carry ongoing potential for sudden cold intrusions of exactly the type arriving tonight. Gardeners, farmers, and anyone who made plans based on that warm first week of April are being urged to treat the rest of the month with caution. The Met Office has already debunked dramatic tabloid claims of a full snow blizzard burying the country, which is not what the models show, but they have confirmed that northerly winds capable of delivering cold nights, isolated frost, and wintry showers to northern and elevated areas remain firmly in the picture. The practical advice from meteorologists is simple and consistent. Check road conditions before traveling early tomorrow morning. Do not assume that because the sun is out during the day, the temperature is safe after dark. Wind chill is the hidden danger in this kind of event. It affects anybody outdoors, whether walking, cycling, or simply waiting at a bus stop. Rural drivers in Scotland, Wales, and northern England should expect icy stretches on untreated roads. Those in exposed coastal locations should prepare for gusts that are not just uncomfortable, but capable of causing real disruption. This is not the kind of cold that shuts the country down. Britain has seen far worse this winter alone. But it is the kind of cold that catches people off guard precisely because it is arriving in April, because the last 2 weeks delivered warm sunshine, and because the gap between expectation and reality will be at its widest tonight and tomorrow morning. The atmosphere does not follow a calendar. It does not know that April is supposed to feel like spring. And right now, with a polar vortex that split months ago still sending its disrupted ripples through the jet stream, with La Niña releasing its grip and leaving the atmospheric pattern exposed, and with a Greenland block holding the door wide open for Arctic air to pour south, Britain is being reminded of something that this winter tried to say repeatedly. The season on the wall is not always the season outside your window. Wrap up tonight. Keep an eye on the road report in the morning. And do not put the winter coat away just yet. But there is one more layer to this story that is easy to miss when you are focused on the immediate cold. Because this Arctic blast is not arriving in isolation. It is arriving alongside something that climate scientists and long-range forecasters are tracking with growing concern. The polar regions are warming 4 times faster than the global average. That difference is reducing the temperature gradient that normally keeps the polar jet stream tight and predictable. A tight jet stream holds Arctic air locked above the high latitudes where it belongs. A weakened jet stream meanders. It allows cold air to break southward and warm air to push north where it does not belong. The result is a world where the differences between extremes become sharper even as the average temperature rises. Colder cold snaps in spring, hotter heat events in summer, and a general instability in the atmospheric circulation that makes planning, farming, and infrastructure management progressively harder. The sudden stratospheric warming event that triggered all of this was not isolated. The UK experienced multiple SSW events throughout the 2025 into 2026 season, each one sending disruptions cascading through the atmospheric layers. Scientists note their frequency appears to be increasing. What is already clear is that when an SSW occurs, the downstream consequences for British weather are real, significant, and now far better understood than they were even a decade ago. In practical terms, the data cannot yet tell you with confidence exactly when this pattern ends. The Greenland block directing Arctic air toward Britain tonight is a self-reinforcing feature. Once established, blocking patterns can persist for days or weeks. Models are showing growing confidence in a gradual shift toward calmer, drier conditions by late in the week. But the northerly tonight and tomorrow is not in dispute. And the further cold intrusions flagged as possible throughout the rest of April mean this is not necessarily the last time this spring that Britain is caught off guard by conditions that feel more like February than April. The message from every credible meteorological source is consistent. This is a real, physically grounded cold event with a well-understood cause. It is not a tabloid fabrication. It is also not something to be dismissed. The combination of Arctic air, wind chill, overnight frost, and icy roads creates genuine hazard for vulnerable people, for early morning travelers, and for communities in Scotland and northern England, where the cold arrives first and stays longest. Stay informed. Check the Met Office for the latest regional warnings before traveling. And when the jet stream is this disrupted and the polar vortex this weak, remember that the gap between a mild afternoon and a dangerous overnight frost can close in a matter of hours. Tonight is one of those nights.